The Historia Naturalis Brasiliae, often called Brazilian natural history when translated into English, is an important aspect of Brazilian and colonial Latin American history in terms of both ecology and culture. The importance of the book stems from the fact that it was telling not just Dutch perspectives of Brazilian natives and environment, but also go on to influence many other scientists who would go on to use the Historia Naturalis Brasiliae. As for some general background knowledge, the book was published in 1648 during the Dutch occupation of northeastern Brazil that lasted from approximately 1630 to 1654, and was written by Willem Piso with research by George McGrath under the request of John Martins, who was court of Nassau at the time. Martins was very interested in wildlife, and the contents are reflective of how particular he was about the information that was requested. The contents itself are what you'd expect from a work on natural history. There are numerous pictures of flora and fauna, as well as native people. The pictures of the wildlife include fish, humans, toads, and snakes, just to name a few. Drawings of the animals were full of rich detail and are testament to the positive reputation that has been given to the book. The descriptions that came with these images of animals and plants were incredibly detailed and contained plenty of information. This book would hold incredible significance even today, with several modern-day journal articles still trying to correct mistakes that Piso and McGrath might have made, or simple oversights that were to be expected from such a document. The book is an important part of colonial Latin American history because the contents allow people to gain a much deeper insight into relations between the Dutch and indigenous people, as well as the importance beyond the colonial period. Naturally, the part that explains Dutch and indigenous relations is a description of the native people. Justin E.H. Smith makes note in his chapter from Nature, Nature, and Human Difference, Race in Early Modern Philosophy, that Willem Piso himself said once before that the indigenous people of Brazil were simply too barbaric in nature and lacking in science. Upon looking at the pictures of natives depicted in Historia Naturalis Brasiliae, many of these images contain an emphasis on nudity, a common element in many European renditions of indigenous people. Their inclusion in the document can also symbolize the way that the colonists saw the indigenous people as animal-like. Given these examples, the document gives us an insight as to how the Dutch perceived the Brazilian natives. Aside from the occasional images mentioned beforehand, the document mostly focused on flora and fauna, with examples of them being numerous. The inclusion of these images showed that the Dutch were incredibly particular about the environment in Brazil, perhaps serving as an indication of Dutch interest in the resources that Brazil had. The cultural significance of this book extends beyond just the colonial period, and as it has managed to maintain usefulness among scientists well beyond the colonial period, as well as serve as another way to reason why the Dutch might have decided to put so much effort on occupying Brazil. Information found within the Historia Naturalis Brasiliae was incredibly important in the field of natural history, and had a fair amount of influence in other works of scientists. Maria Angelica da Silva and Melissa Mota Alquides' journal article give an example of one of these scientists in the form of Ole Worm, a natural historian from Denmark. His work on Denmark natural history would see several influences from Piso's work. While it would not use much of the scientific findings of the book, the influences used were mainly in the form of organizational structure. The existence of the book caused other scientists to become more interested in the field. Historian Bruce McBride in his journal article describing rediscoveries of Brazilian collections uses the example of Carl Linnaeus and Albert Oblate, who, after reading Historia Naturalis Brasiliae, found themselves more interested in a certain type of taxa. Aside from those mentioned above, those influenced by Historia Naturalis Brasiliae are numerous and remains as one of the most important documents of colonial Latin American history, and gives anyone who reads it an insight into how complex the relationships between the Dutch and Brazilians were during occupation. Thank you for watching, and I hope this has encouraged you to pursue further information about not just the Historia Naturalis Brasiliae, but colonial Latin America history as well.